Today's presentation is on globalisation and migration. The participants are Mc Gowan, Eoin Gallagher, Dionne Mc Laughlin, Eoin Barrett and Dionne Keeney. Transnational cinema is an evolving concept within film studies that involves a range of theories relating to the effects of globalisation upon the cultural and economic aspects of film. Transnational cinema urges a certain shift away from films with a national focus. Transnationalism wishes to stray away from harmonisation to stop their products from becoming similar and uniform as other films. The Dark Knight Rises is seen as a transnational film because many of the cast and crew are from different cultures, and one of the leading actors in the film, Heath Ledger, is originally from Australia. Marked transnational films are films that clearly show elements of transnationalism through the number of levels of production, such as the distribution of the product, the reception of the product from the audience, and the production in itself. These marked properties are there to encourage the viewer to think about transnationality. Unmarked transnational films don't draw attention to these issues through the use of styler stories, but through the research transnational elements can be found in the distribution. For example, strongly transnational films might be unmarked, but when studied close through investigation of who the stories came from and where they originated, it can have underlying transnational elements. Red Road 2006 is a British-Danish co-production which shows the collaboration through European countries and is strongly transnational, although the film was based on a CCTV operator in Glasgow. The cinema of globalisation is characterised by Deborah Shaw as films that openly state questions raised by globalisation, particularly the ways it relates to the power between nations, such as global labour histories, multinational corporations, and the daily lives of the working class and the people who play them on screens. Shaw also draws attention on a definition developed by Tom Sanello in the cinema of globalisation.
Narrative can be fruitful to the perception of the borders that surround us and that we deal with on a daily basis. Border narratives can help us understand the notions of difference and other in real daily situations, rather than as abstract sociological constructs. Like Babel, there are many films engaged with experiences of individuals or groups who cross borders and their consequences. Some of those films explore the violence of the border crossing experience. Courtney Hunt's Frozen River, about how a single mother's struggle to provide for her children draws her into a people smuggling operation. It was an independently produced American film by a female director and won the Grand Jury Prize at the Sundance Festival in 2008. Wilfred Rosert has argued that Frozen River opens up a series of perspectives for conceiving borders as multidimensional in the context of human relationships, legal jurisdiction, and geological power. By focusing on two powerless individuals, Hunt's film stresses the ways in which border crossings become means of mobility and agency. On the point of mobility, in her book Immigration Cinema in the New Europe, Iselina Ballesteros argues that mobility is a central feature of what she calls the border crossing road movie. A critical cinematic example might be Easy Rider, in which the two central characters, with a motorcycle gas tank full of cash from a drug deal, set out to discover spiritual transcendence. Ballesteros quotes, "Border crossing films are often adaptations of the outlaw road movie, in which characters are on the road out of necessity rather than choice. They are fugitives escaping from oppression, prosecution, or economic disadvantage, whose liberation depends on the success of their flight, their survival, and their arrival at their destination." Like Ballesteros, Thomas G. Devaney, in his book Migration in Contemporary Hispanic Cinema, sees a growth of films that have responded to migration from Africa to Europe and Latin to North America. He draws a direct line between Letters of Alo and 14 Kilometers as part of a core set of films that investigate the impact of African immigration in Spain. In Letters from Alo, the title character arrives in Spain from Senegal by boat in a frightening sequence at night and finds himself undocumented and therefore unable to find secure or permanent work. The film uses journeying as an ongoing metaphor. As Ballesteros notes, this second crossing by Alo after his deportation defines immigration's circular nature and exposes the futility of border controls in a country that keeps demanding a cheap labour force. The film's narrative is structured by Alo's voiceover in the form of Letters Back Home, which demonstrates the importance of links with home, a core theme of many transnational films that posit a strong connection across borders, between those who traverse them and those who are left behind.
Hort defined the different ways in which cinematic transnationalisms are conceptualized by identifying 9 different modes of transnationalism. Each mode highlights a different set of values. Epiphanic relates to an epiphany. This category is defined as the ways in which shared qualities of national belonging are disclosed. The main focus is on how cinema highlights forms of deep-rooted national belonging that exhibit shared aspects with other national identities to produce a deep transnational belonging. Affinitive stresses affinities across borders and national identities. This is often defined in terms of shared ethnicity, languages that are either similar or mutually intelligible, and a long-standing history of interaction that has produced commonalities and shared core values, practices, and cultural institutions. Milieu building. A filmmaking environment might be shared across boundaries as a way of resisting globalizing homogenization of Hollywood. Hort offers an example of a project called Advanced Party, a collaborative undertaking between Scottish and Danish filmmakers to produce a small nation milieu as an alternative or complementary form of cultural policy. Opportunistic transnationalism is less positive than the first 3 since it takes advantage of whatever financing exists to get a project made with no thought as to where that funding may come from, meaning it may produce a strongly transnational but unmarked product. Auteurist is a form of transnationalism that is concerned with the investment made by auteurs in the matters of transnationalism. Hort gives the example of the portmanteau film that brings together several auteurs of different nations to produce a variation on a theme. Cosmopolitan filmmakers, often through their ethnicity, can exhibit multiple belonging through their films. Hort mentions the work of Evans Chan, an ethnically Chinese filmmaker born in mainland China, but educated in Hong Kong and America, based in New York, whose films are targeted at Chinese audiences in Hong Kong and beyond China. Works in this category explore various issues of migration and the intersection of national, transnational, and post-colonial issues. Globalizing transnationalisms acknowledge the shortfalls of national cinema funding streams by producing films with strongly transnational audience appeal in terms of genre and stardom. Modernity is not a totalizing concept. Modernizing transnationalism is often seen in cultural policy such as Hong Kong and South Korea, in which the state-of-the-art filmmaking practice is designed as a cultural expression that brings modernization and transformation. Experimental. This final category in some cases resists that of the other 8. It often seeks not to capitalize on deeply shared cultures, nor to engage with global cinemagoers. Its value is ascribed through artistic expression, through which filmmaking engages socially, politically, and aesthetically with transnationalism. Many of the modes mentioned relate to the social, political, and cultural values, so they easily intersect to different ways of depending on how strong or weak, marked or unmarked aspects of the film are understood. In the 2015 The Revenant, director, producer, and co-screenwriter Alejandro González Iñárritu has a strong influence over this transnational story of a US fur trader depicting the history of the North American West in the 1820s, while also highlighting a very specific view on religion. This film revolves around the themes of religion, fatherhood, and revenge. With a Mexican director partnered with a Mexican cinematographer, Emmanuel Lubezki, this creates a very unique version of US history not typically displayed. Birdman 2014 was also written, directed, and produced by Alejandro González Iñárritu. Unlike The Revenant, Birdman focuses less on reality and more on the creativity of the protagonist. Set in New York, there is a dreamlike atmosphere present throughout the film that depicts Regan Thompson's creative vision and steadily declining mental capacity. This may also reflect his dreams of success in Broadway.
Babel is shot in an observational documentary style in terms of the camera techniques being used. Throughout the film, the camera work is mostly handheld, which helps add realism as we observe the lives of all these different characters in different parts of the world. From the scene where Cate Blanchett's character Susan is shot unexpectedly while she sleeps on a bus, the handheld camera work suddenly becomes more frantic as it moves back and forth between showing the shock on both Richard's face and the passengers. The frantic camera work tells the emotion of the scene. The similar camera techniques and style being used throughout all of these different character stories, all in different parts of the world, helps convey this film's message of human connection having no borders. The film uses match cuts to show a contrast between all of these character stories. A good example of this being the cut from a distressing scream in Tokyo to the silence of a deaf-mute girl's point of view in Tokyo. Other than this being a good way to show the contrast between characters, it is also a great way to move from storyline to storyline. As we close on Richard and Susan's story, Susan is being rescued by air support. Almost all diegetic sound is gone, including dialogue, and we only hear the soundtrack accompany the visuals. I believe this decision was made in editing to put more emphasis on the emotion behind the scene, specifically how thankful Richard is, as we see him offer money to a man that helped him. The man rejects his money and we see Richard mouth the words, "Thank you." Babel tells 4 stories that all take part in different parts of the world, which means the setting often changes whenever the story does. The film is shot on location in Morocco, the United States, Mexico and Japan, enforcing its theme of globalisation. Amelia, the children's Mexican nanny, wears a red dress while at her son's wedding. This could symbolise love and desire she has for her family in Mexico and the children she's looking after. Later in the film, when she is stranded in the Mexican desert with the children, this red dress takes on a new meaning and can symbolise the danger of the situation and determination she has to get them out of there.
The most interesting aspect of the film sound-wise is how the characters speak several languages rather than one. Dialogue is used effectively in this way as it delivers one of the film's major themes, communication. The film shows how conflict occurs when people from different cultures fail to communicate and understand each other. It demonstrates how transnational films can communicate powerful messages. During the nightclub scene, the audio keeps cutting between the music playing there and pure silence. This contrasts what most people would hear at a nightclub with what Chieko hears. This juxtaposition allows the audience to easily empathize with her situation and also reinforces the theme of communication. The film occasionally uses formal lighting techniques to achieve certain effects, such as getting the audience to empathize with a character's situation, for example how Chieko's disability affects her, or to deliver social commentary, like how needlessly aggressive and uncompassionate the border patrol can be. However, it most respects natural lighting to create a sense of realism, thus differentiating it from most Hollywood films.
We will now each give our conclusion. This film production is a great representation of transnational cinema, with powerful storylines from each culture. Seeing how the stories unfold kept me invested the whole way through.
I love that the film left some of the storylines with a little ambiguity, letting you think for yourself where those characters ended up.
I liked the concept of 4 plots being intertwined with one common object. Despite distance, each of these characters share concerns regarding family and home.
I liked how realistic the film felt while watching. This made me more invested in each of the stories being told and their outcome.
I found the use of multiple languages to be very interesting, unlike anything I'd ever seen before. Thanks for listening.